Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Dragon Balls podcast. I'm your host, Stuart, and alongside me is Millie.
I hear that.
So how have you been, Millie? Have you been all right? Have you been in quarantine?
Yeah, getting used to it. Going outside for 20 minutes a day is a little less than I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
Only a little less, but I do miss going to the cinema, which is a thing I wasn't expecting to be missing.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so many bad films on Netflix you can watch until you wish you could have something new.
Yeah, definitely. It's that quarantine lifestyle we're all living at the moment. Wishing we could break the boundaries of the four walls and hopefully do something a bit more interesting sooner rather than later, but I don't think that's going to be the case with the lockdown being extended by 3 weeks, but
Woo!
there you go. Basically, if you haven't listened to us before, which I would imagine is quite a lot of you who are listening, since we've only just really got started, basically this podcast is about the general ins and outs of sport and news and topics that come up on a weekly basis. So yeah, we talk about a range of different sports like basketball, football, American football, cricket, all that good stuff, and basically just discuss all the topics and get our thoughts and what we think on what's happening in the world of sport. So at the moment, we've currently been added onto Spotify as of last week. We're currently working on iTunes. Bit of a trickier process than you might imagine, but we are working on it at the moment. So if you do give us a listen on any topics that we put out there, please give us a follow and spread the word and let us know what you think about the podcast. So moving on from that, to get into today's podcast, we're going to discuss two topics. One is the potential takeover of Newcastle and what that might mean going forward. And also we're going to give our Premier League all-time 11 squads, both from my perspective and from Millie's perspective, and see what we think and compare and contrast that. So we'll get started with the first topic, which is the potential takeover of Newcastle. Obviously, the stories of the past couple of weeks have been that it's edging closer and closer. The Premier League is currently reviewing it as it stands. It would seem like it's going to go through, but with Newcastle, you never really 100% know what's happening, especially after the takeover attempt last summer. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on it, Millie?
My first thought is only Mike Ashley could sell the football club when the financial markets are in a downturn. I mean, like, the man's got skills. People might not like the skills, but the man's got skills. It's... I'm in two minds about it, really. Ashley has been very good from a financial point of view in the beginning of his reign, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And then the club hasn't grown in the past 5 years or so, when it really should have. When the TV money has exploded, the club hasn't grown as much as it should. Which is why the fans are wanting new owners.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit rich to ask this in modern times, but I kind of wish it was a different owner buying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like there are obvious problems.
Yeah.
With the buyers involved.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. I think there's obviously going to be major questions asked about whether or not the people involved should be allowed to be involved. But because it's
there's nothing in the fit and proper test that will stop them buying the club. Like there's absolutely not there is no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to own a football club. It's just there's a moral part of lots of people that go, oh, I kind of don't want to be associated with this. And that's just something we're going to have to live with.
Yeah.
It's just how easy is that? We don't know until we get there, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the whole... I think obviously people are obviously looking at it through a bit more of a different outside the box thought processes are thinking that the takeover is happening from obviously the Saudi Arabia point of view, of a bit of a sports washing to try and generate a more positive image. And
It's funny how that's an argument now, but that wasn't an argument when Abu Dhabi bought Man City or when Qatar bought PSG.
yeah,
It is interesting that that's came up now, and yes, you can argue Saudi Arabia's recent track record is worse than the others, but that's kind of an argument you shouldn't really be having. Like if you're gonna complain about this, which is a legitimate complaint, I don't have a problem with people using that. My only question is where were you 10 years ago, whatever, when the last round happened, and where were you 5 years ago when 3 Chinese consortiums bought West Brom, Aston Villa, and Wolves?
Yeah.
Like there wasn't anything there about sport washing. And the Villa one went completely tits up because the guy couldn't get the money out of China.
Yeah. I know.
So it is be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there'll be many problems financing the club.
No. Well, it's like I think the reports of how much wealth there is going into this backing is that they've got around 260 billion in the coffers if they were to use that. Yeah. Obviously, I don't think they would come into near that amount of spending on it in terms of building Newcastle or getting them back up the table or whatever they decide to do with infrastructure. But
if you had if you had a lot of money and you wanted to buy a English football club, the two most obvious ones to buy would be Newcastle or Leeds, because they are massive clubs with good history, and they are most importantly one city clubs. I'll say one club cities. They are one club cities. So you're not competing with neighbours per se.
No.
And so you can have a whole city coming to you. It's a massive advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that as well, it's like you were saying about being a big club. Newcastle is what you would consider that term that gets thrown around by a lot of Premier League clubs of being a truly sleeping giant, in that if the right person does come in and puts the right money into them, they can get back to the what they were 20 years ago, which was fighting for the top 4 or 5, 6 positions and fighting for European places. I'm not saying that they're going to necessarily be fighting for the title, because who knows how far the money can go really, but there is an ability, if they get the right people in, that they could move up the table from where they're currently sitting, which is in that sort of 10 to 15 mid-table spot
at best.
That's obviously if they've got the right personnel in and the results are going their way. But obviously if it wasn't, then they could have turned into a potential yo-yo club of going up and down every season.
Yeah, I mean, back 20 years ago, when it was Sir John Hall and Freddie Shepherd running the club, they were running at quite a big loss. And when Ashley came and bought the club, he wiped away all that debt, which is what actually saved the club in the very short term when they went down, because they had a massive loan, and which was tied to the stadium on the basis that they'd always had Premier League football. And they went down the year Ashley bought them, or the year after or something. So they were so the way the club was ran back in the heyday, where people want to get back to, wasn't actually sustainable. So it's a bit of, there's a lot more money now, so trying to do that should be easier. But like Everton have had some rich owners come in, throwing a lot of money at the problem, and are better, but the progress probably hasn't been as linear as they'd hoped it'd be.
Yeah, but I think that obviously for Everton it's a case of they're probably hoping the next couple of seasons are where it really starts to kick into gear in terms of their progress, because the likes of Ancelotti joining the club, and hopefully a couple of summer transfer windows with him and his direction leading the club, then that's what they'll be hoping takes them on to that next level.
I know we were like on a hiatus when the Ancelotti hiving and stuff happened,
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't really talked about it, but the Ancelotti hiring is just weird.
Mm-hmm.
For a club like Everton, they feel like Ancelotti is sort of a person you hire when you're close but just need a little push.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a big name, and that's what they wanted to go for. Wanted a big name, but
Mm-hmm.
ideally, if you're wanting to break into the top six, you want to have a manager who, or a coach at least, who isn't going to be like picked up
Mm-hmm.
by a big club if they come available. And I think Ancelotti, if it doesn't go swimmingly, will look abroad quite quickly.
Yeah, but I think that the clear definition for Everton is that they are pushing forward with a name like Ancelotti, and they're hoping that sparks life back into it.
I get the process; it just isn't the way I would have gone.
Yeah, but I think if you look at the results since he's joined, I don't
Oh
think
yeah,
you
it's
can
been
argue.
it's been good. Like just like I'm not saying that they were wrong, and I'm not saying I'm wrong. It's just like I would have gone a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah. So on that basis, then, if this takeover does go through, how exactly do you think what do you think it means basically for Newcastle's future? Do you think that there is that this will give them that ability to go up the table, or do you think it could be a few years or a little while before they can start fighting with the big names again, or do you think that's something that isn't realistic in their long-term future if the takeover does happen?
It's impossible to say because we don't know how the backroom, like the backroom
Mm-hmm.
staff of the club is actually functional, how
Mm-hmm.
it functions.
Mm-hmm.
I do not like Steve Bruce as a coach of a Premier League side, so the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I would do is get rid of Steve Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be very difficult initially to get the players that you want to get, even if you have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when City came in and had billions to play with,
Mm-hmm.
they had to A, pay way off the top for players, and B, the players that they got on that first window, Fabinho excluded,
Mm-hmm.
weren't top draw.
Yeah.
You do have to work your way up.
Yeah.
There's no
Like there isn't. You can't just instantly go in and get Harry Kane
Yeah, exactly.
and buy those players straight away. You've got to work your way up to it and buy those players that are going to be there for the long term, that are not necessarily at the top of the game at the moment, but the potential is there, and hopefully they hit their potential. Especially if you look at the likes of City when they bought like Company and Aguero, they weren't necessarily at the top of the game, but they were showing signs that they were close to it. And when they've hit the stride, that's when they've won them the trophies and got them to the top of the league and won them titles. But yeah, I think as long as they get the structure right and they get the right person in, because I agree with what you're saying, that I don't think, and I wouldn't say I would necessarily sack Bruce on what his performance is, but basically if you are aiming to get up that table, you need to bring someone who has a better experience and has an ability to coach players at a higher level, and develop players at a better rate, which is why I think the names that have been touted or have been rumoured are the likes of, I think Pochettino is an obvious link because he's currently free at the moment. And I think in the summer, once the summer transfer window kicks in or a certain date hits, he will be a free candidate. And I think there was something on the betting odds that Allegri's odds have been slashed, which may just be complete pie in the sky nonsense. But then another name which has been talked about is about potentially bringing Rafa back, trying to get him back to manage Newcastle again. So would you be happy with any of those names, or is there someone in particular you have in mind?
I mean, I would be happy with all three of those names, but I don't think any of those three names are realistic.
Yeah.
Pochettino will go there. I mean, Allegri, that's just a foreign coach who is free going to the top of the bet market. And I can't imagine Rafa leaving the project that he signed up for. I mean, that's like the reason he went to China. I mean, A, was for money, but B, he says, at least, He was attracted by the project that he's got there, and obviously, with not enough football being played at the moment, that project's still ongoing. So Rafa doesn't strike me as a manager who leaves early.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose it depends. It depends on what gets offered, really. Because if they offer him what he's always wanted at Newcastle, which was a transfer kitty to be able to develop the team and his own authority on things, you never know. Going back to somewhere where he clearly enjoyed managing, apart from the direction from above, then there's no reason why. I don't think there would be any particular reason why he would say no. But
there's no reason why it won't be an attractive offer. I just think that if you look at Rafa's career, every time he's had a job, he's left at a natural resting space, or he got fired. Essentially, one of the two. He's never jumped ship to go to another club whilst he's in the middle of doing something, and so it's difficult for me to assume he would go back to Newcastle when he hasn't finished what he wants to do in China.
Yeah, I can see your point there. That's pretty spot on point there. I mean, in terms of the other two names, I don't think Allegri will happen. Pochettino is probably, as you say, a name that's out there that's free at the moment. I mean, if I was going to pick someone, it probably would be Pochettino. If you're looking for someone who's going to develop a younger player that they're probably going to try and buy in and get them into the level that they want to be, and someone who's got experience of the Premier League, then Poch probably is the name you try and go and get. But in terms of whether or not they'll be able to get them, it's another question. But yeah, it's all. I think the main component, obviously, the answer to this question is, if the takeover does go through, how quickly can they get that structure in place, and what are the names that they are bringing in terms of both the manager, the coaching staff, as well as the players. And if they get that structure right, then there's no reason why they couldn't start building like City did once the pieces fell into place.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the list on Oddschecker just to see where, because just where you talk, I just had a name pop into my head, so I was just wanting to see where he was on the list. If I was Newcastle, I would throw a lot of money at Erik ten Hag, who is quite the way down this list. So maybe not, but that's the sort of person I would go after if I was Newcastle. You want somebody like if you're wanting to get fans on side and you've got a lot of money, get a youngish manager who has a history of playing quote unquote attractive football. And Nagelsmann's not going to be available, so Ten Hag will be next on my list.
Yeah, those all seem like, I think I'd agree with those names there in terms of the level of manager and experience of what you're looking for, in terms of having to fit that into the culture that you're trying to build.
I mean, there's no chance Nagelsmann leaves his job for anything other than a massive club. So, like, that's pie in the sky. But I think
no, but it's that sort of area name, isn't it? That sort of experience as well, though, that you're looking for. Even if that name isn't available, that doesn't mean there isn't someone who's of a similar ability or level that might not be able to come over to Newcastle.
Someone like Roberto Martinez might not be the worst idea in the world. I'm not the biggest fan of Martinez because I really struggle with how his sides don't defend, but someone like that, I don't think is. You could spin Martinez as a good appointment quite easily to fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of whoever does come in, if the takeover happens, it's going to be interesting either way. But yeah, I think for the takeover we'll leave it there, because obviously it's a lot of if, buts and maybes at the moment, but it's definitely interesting to see how it develops, and we'll watch this space, I suppose, when it comes to that takeover.
I think if was probably the most used word in that last 20 minutes.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Right, so moving on from that then, we'll move on to our favourite / best Premier League 11. So I've just drawn mine up based on a 4-4-2 formation. I don't know if you've got anything specific with it.
I've got a narrow 4-3-3, which probably edges into what I've done with my team, which you're probably going to disagree with.
No, I don't think there should be any major disagreements, but as I say, I think the names we'll have picked will be worthy of being considered in the 11s. It's just a case of whether or not we've matched up closely or if we're really far apart.
I don't think we'll be too far apart.
No, I don't think we will be either. So, start off with you then. Who have you put down as your goalkeeper?
Schmeichel.
Right.
I mean, the only other person I generally thought of for like a brief millisecond before I realised I was being stupid was Petr Cech. But
right, okay. Well, this may surprise you then because I've went for Petr Cech.
Oh, okay. I can see the argument for Petr Cech. One of the reasons I went for Schmeichel is I was very conscious about not making this all like people past 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I did try to get quite a few, and just the thing with Schmeichel is like, especially with United in around like the late 90s or early noughties,
mm-hmm.
you just knew that United were going to be impossible to beat.
Mm-hmm.
For like, and part of that is the goalkeeper. Like, he was fantastic. It's difficult to put into words, but it's just like when we were growing up, Schmeichel was the best keeper, and I don't think Cech is that far ahead of the rest of what Schmeichel was ahead of the rest of the pack in my mind, and that's what I've tried to do.
Yeah, I think for me the reason I went for Cech is I think because I always remember, whilst all your points are absolutely 100% valid on Schmeichel, like it was a 50-50 between Cech and Schmeichel. I think just for me growing up, I always remember that Chelsea defence and how absolutely awful it was to play against.
Those first 2 years
with Cech.
First 2 years of Mourinho at Chelsea.
Mm-hmm.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think on average at his time at Chelsea, I think if I remember the stat rightly, he conceded around 22 goals on average, and I think the first season they broke the record for the least amount of goals conceded. So I think like, whilst the argument could be made that obviously Cech probably won't be as good if the defence of him in front of him wasn't as good as it was, I think in terms of Cech's overall ability, I think for me in terms of his record of his averages and things like that, and just my general memory of Cech as a keeper when he was at Chelsea in those early years, that's what tipped the scale for me. Remembering obviously Cech versus Schmeichel. I mean, again, it's a 50-50 coin toss between the two, and I just went for Cech more on the basis of who I put in front of him, rather than obviously the basis of who I thought was better, really, because I think if 50-50 in terms of clean sheets and things like that, I think they're pretty close, but I went for Cech on those bases.
Okay.
So moving on from goalkeepers then, who do you put down as right back?
I have Gary Neville.
I also have Gary Neville.
Yeah, I mean, I get like for me it's the same argument as Schmeichel. It's just like both. I've got the same argument really for my fullbacks. Is they were just so consistent, and like I've tried to do ones that are played for years, like for a long period of time, just consistently up there, and it's just I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of an argument for many other people in that spot. I think right back was probably the easiest spot for me.
Yeah,
which
definitely.
is weird.
I think you if you go to right back, there's no one who's either playing the game now in the Premier League or who has since retired and stopped playing the Premier League that got anywhere close to the longevity and the consistency of Neville. I think Neville was so good at going forward and helping Beckham out, but he was also brilliant defensively, and it's very. And I suppose in recent history, from memory alone, there's not many players that do both. You're either very good at going forward as a right back, or you're very good defensively. And it's like if you think of Kyle Walker, it's probably one of the better right backs of the past 10 years. He's never been consistently at the top level, and he's always been good defensively. But going forward, I've never felt he was that good. He never really put a consistently good ball in like Neville did. Because on that right hand side for United, it was if Beckham wasn't putting the ball in, it was Neville.
Yeah.
And defensively, Neville was always sound. He very rarely had bad games. But I think in terms of like going forward in like sort of like the future generations, the names that sort of jump out to me who might sort of rival him by the time that the careers are up, people like Trent Alexander-Arnold, if he improves defensively as he should do, because he is still relatively young, and Wan-Bissaka, because I think Wan-Bissaka is already brilliant defensively, but going forward he needs to get better.
I think Wan-Bissaka is the one on right back, mainly because I think Alexander-Arnold is going to morph into more of a centre midfielder.
Yeah.
On like that inside right channel rather than as a fullback. I mean, the way Liverpool play at the moment is essentially with their fullbacks as wingers when they're both going forward, which works. But I will be a little surprised if Alexander-Arnold stays as a fullback his entire career. I think he could quite easily morph into a centre midfield sort of area. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we both agree on right back, so we'll jump to the other side on left back. Who do you put for left back?
Ashley Cole.
Oh, we agree again.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, fullbacks are really the easiest choice, and the thing with Ashley Cole is people like know of like going forward a lot. You could probably count on one hand in a season how many bad games he had defensively, and that's the thing that always stood out with me. It's just Cole was always so dependable on that side.
Yeah. I know obviously we're focused on the Premier League, but if you also look at it from an international perspective, how many people got into that England team when he was left back?
No one did.
No one got in. So in terms of his consistency as well, you've got to remember he played in the Invincibles team. He then went to the Chelsea team that was so dominant under Mourinho for those first couple of seasons. He was then obviously through the Chelsea team who were in and out of the title races and in and out of winning the Premier League, and then won the Champions League in the early 2010s. Like his Premier League and Chelsea and Arsenal career and England career speak for itself, and I think that anybody else, whilst you've had good left backs throughout the Premier League years, for the consistency and the longevity, I don't think there's many that obviously match that really. So yeah, Ashley Cole and Gary Neville are the two full-backs. So who do you put for your two centre-backs?
I really struggle with the centre-backs. I'm not happy with my choices, but I have Tony Adams and Vincent Kompany.
Right. Okay. Right.
Mainly for the same reason, which is a bit weird. Like, Adams was just... Growing up in like the late 90s, Adams was Mr. Arsenal. Like, he just seemed so in control of that Arsenal back line. You had, what was it, Winterburn, Keown, Adams and Dixon. That back four for Arsenal, and when Wenger first joined. And again, it's just like, it might be my kid brain, but like, I can't remember him ever having a bad game.
Yeah. No, Adams was a hell of a defender, and again, you can make the argument. There's a clear argument for Adams in terms of the success he had with Arsenal. Winning, was it 2-3 Premier League titles he won with them, and also being part of the Invincibles, and obviously the career that he had in the Premier League. I think it's undoubtedly in the top. He's definitely in the top 4 or 5 centre backs for me, of all time in the Premier League. And then for Kompany as well.
For me, Kompany is what this is basically the embodiment of what this City side has been now for like the past 7-8 years. So I had to get at least one Man City player in, and I think Company is probably the most influential one of the ones they bought at that time. So
yeah, I think. Well, I haven't got any City players in my 11, but the reason for that is I've got a couple of rules that I put into mine, which included you had to have won the Premier League title, and you need to no longer either be playing as in retired or not playing in the Premier League. So for me, that's why Company. I didn't put Company in there for the reason of the two that I put in. I think had a bigger impact.
I had a choice of 4 in my head, so I picked 2. I have a feeling you've probably picked the other 2.
Possibly. I know one of them will definitely be. The other one might be a bit different for you.
Okay.
But I went for John Terry and Nemanja Vidic.
You see, I had Terry and Ferdinand as my other 2.
Yeah, I felt Ferdinand was probably the other person to pick.
Yeah.
I think for Terry, if I go into him first, again, it's the same argument to make for Ashley Cole. He came in I think he came in at about 18, 19 to that Chelsea team, and was captain straight away and didn't miss a beat. And basically the longevity of the guy and how consistent he was. How many bad games did Terry have over the 10, 15 years he was in the league? The answer is not very many. And basically, yeah, I mean, it's the same argument I can make with Ash Cole. He was in the England team. He was constantly... I mean, I'd be surprised if he missed many of the end-of-season award teams for the Premier League. And just defensively, him, Cole, and Cech are really were really a cornerstone of that team. And yeah, for a defensive unit, I think Terry being part of that would have absolutely had to have gone in there. The reason I went for Vidic rather than Ferdinand is just a personal preference for me. No denying how great a defender and how good on the ball Ferdinand was, but for an all-out defender who literally put everything on the line week in, week out, I don't think there was many better over the course of the history of the Premier League than Vidic. He didn't know how to sort of not put himself at risk. There was always a highlight on Match of the Day where he was literally throwing his head into the most squeamish of precarious positions, where you're probably going to get his head kicked off or broke his nose or whatever, and he was just an absolute warrior. Yes, there were there may have been the odd time, like obviously the infamous 4-1 against Liverpool where he was absolutely undone, but for me, Vidic was just an absolute warrior, and that's why he went in for my back 4. Nothing against Ferdinand, but for me, I don't know if it's just recency bias or whatever, but I always remember that QPR season for Ferdinand.
Yeah,
and I always felt that that's always something of a blip for me.
Yeah.
Granted, it's probably the rest of the team around him, but Vidic went from United to Inter Milan, and that for me was a little bit of a tipping scale because Vidic was still at the top of his level, or maybe not at the top of his level, but still somewhere near that level in his last couple of seasons, whilst Ferdinand sort of hit that cliff and nosedived off. But for me, out of personal preference and one of my favourite players and of Man United of all time, that's why Vidic went in there for me.
Yeah, I totally understand. My argument for Ferdinand was based on we see a lot of centre backs comfortable with the ball, bringing it out, passing into midfield and stuff, and Ferdinand for me was like the early trendset for that in the noughties. That's why Ferdinand sticks in the head for me. He was the one at the back who would build up. Vidic was the rock to defend, but the move started through Ferdinand. So I was maybe trying to get that balance, but
yeah,
I don't have a problem with Vidic.
No, glad to hear it. So, who's your moving on from the defence then? Who's your midfield 3?
Right, so my midfield 3 is Patrick Vieira, Steven Gerrard, and Paul Scholes.
Right. Okay.
So who is your centre midfield 2? We'll do that first.
Mine's Lampard and Scholes.
Yeah, I mean, like, The problem I had is I wanted 4 centre midfielders and I couldn't get them to work, so I had to drop one. And for me, it was between Scholes and Lampard for me, and I picked Scholes mainly because for just the way he just dictated tempo, just those United teams kept for years and years and years kept on taking over. And I remember when he retired and then came back 6 months later, he played was it FA Cup tie against City.
Yeah.
He came off the bench and immediately just ran the show off the bench. I'm like, oh yes, he is this good.
Yeah. I always remember that game just for the shock of him coming back. But I always remember it was one of his first passes. He put it back to the keeper and it was just a little bit too soft. And there was that dreaded thought of, oh no, has he come back and he's not going to be the same as before? But then literally the next ball was cross-field pass to somebody. I was like, no, he's fine. He's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, for Scholes is, again, one of my top 4 or 5 United players ever in terms of favourite United players ever. And I think his contribution in terms of keeping the ball, ticking it over, couldn't tackle for anything, but in terms of keeping the ball, he was amazing in his passing, and even the goals he scored were just... A Paul Scholes goal was usually an absolute screamer or an absolute joy to watch.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, that's why Scholes went into my midfield too. In terms of my other one, Lampard, the reason I picked Lampard ahead of the likes of Gerrard and Keane or Vieira, because I think those are the main guys you would talk about really, is again, it's going back to what I've said about Terry and Cole and the other Chelsea players. It's that longevity and consistency he had. He was always in the game. He always made contributions. He was always on the edge of the box. He was scoring goals, setting people up. He was the best at what he did, and that shows in the titles he's won and the goals he scored and the appearances he's made. Even when he went to City, he was still making contributions to the game for City, and he didn't look like he'd missed a beat, even if it was a bit of a bittersweet ending for him in the Premier League, because he wanted to finish with Chelsea. He was always a great player, Lampard, and again, it was very difficult to pick between him and Gerrard because it's that eternal debate of them two. But for me, again, like I said before, my ruling that it went down to was Lampard has won Premier League titles, and I'm solely looking at it from a Premier League perspective that Lampard should be in there. If we're basing it solely on that, then Lampard should be in there, and Gerrard should miss out.
That's fine. But my argument for Gerrard is that Liverpool wouldn't have been anywhere close to to winning a Premier League title in the seasons that they did come close without him. And yes, you can pick non-Premier League stuff as well to go with it. Like he won he was driving force behind 2005 Istanbul and the 2006 FA Cup final, which I think was even better performance.
Yeah.
And stuff like that does fit in into it as well. But it's just those seasons when it was you had Gerrard and Torres essentially. Between the two of them, yes, you had a nice settled side behind them, but it was literally those two wreaking havoc for the season. That you could argue Liverpool probably should have won the title that year as well.
What, the 2008-2009 season?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think many people still scratch their heads as to how that didn't materialise because of how
I haven't answered on that question.
Good they were. But I mean, if you look at the 4-1, if you just point to that 4-1 of that United at Old Trafford, going to Old Trafford and winning 4-1, how often does that in that era?
I mean, I after that game, I genuinely thought they were going to do it.
Yeah. Oh no, I as a United fan myself, I watched that game and thought, crap, we might be in trouble here. But somehow, somewhere we did. Yes. But again, if I didn't have two midfielders and it was a free, I probably would have gone with Lampard, Scholes, and Gerrard.
Yeah, I mean, The reason I went with three midfielders was A, because I had three strikers that I can choose between them, and B, I thought the central midfielders I was choosing from were stronger than the wingers that I had.
Yeah, I think for me, the two wingers I've got, I think it'll probably be easy for people to guess what they're going to be. But like, I think that whenever I think about obviously my childhood growing up, it was always 4-4-2, and even going into the mid 2000s and late 2000s, it was 4-4-2 as well. So I think for the majority of the Premier League's history, it has been 4-4-2.
I did try to do this as 4-4-2, but I was like, no, there's too many centre midfielders, there's too many strikers. This isn't gonna work.
Yeah. So we've covered Gerrard, we've covered Scholes. Did you cover Vieira?
I haven't covered Vieira. No. Vieira for me, that sort of box to box midfielder for Arsenal has been missing ever since he left. And like in that 5 to 10 year span when Vieira was at Arsenal, he could just take a game and just like, no, we are not losing this. I will literally run over everybody to drag us over the line. And he paired up very well with someone else that I will mention later. But it's just like thinking about how title-winning teams have came about. I can't imagine an Arsenal team winning a title without Vieira in those in those time periods.
Yeah. No, I think again, Vieira's again in the top 5 of all time for me in terms of the Premier League because of both his influence on the team and how much they missed him straight away.
Yeah.
Because they went from being an invincible team to being pretty great, and then Vieira left, and then Arsenal became the Arsenal that we remember for the past 15 years. So yeah, I think that again Vieira is one of those people that has to be right up there. Which is what I said at the start, is like I think everyone we're talking about, there's absolutely an argument that they should be in there, even if people have been missed out in one of the others. So moving on from the central midfielders, I'll go into my two wingers.
Yes.
Left hand side, it'll come as a shock to nobody that I put Ryan Giggs in there. The reason I've put Giggs in there, I think really shouldn't have to go into too much detail on. A, the amount of titles, B, the amount of appearances, C, the amount of goals. Just the longevity of the guy is ridiculous. Like, it's basically unheard of for anybody. It was unheard of back in the 90s to start off as a 19-year-old and get to, I'm not sure if he got to 40. I think he was pretty close though if he didn't. When he retired, to have the amount of appearances and the contribution that he had was just mind-blowing. And again, probably the best left winger that we've had in the Premier League in terms of, again, of that longevity. There's arguably more skilled and better goal scorers in the league that have come and gone. But for me, the longevity of the guy and how well and consistent he played, and even adapted into his later years of his career, becoming a bit part player, but still making big impacts on the pitch when he was on there. Even if he was coming on for the last 20 or 30 minutes a game to try and help the team, he was still making contributions then. So for me, Ryan Giggs absolutely had to be in the left side. Right side may not come as a shock to anybody, but I've picked Ronaldo. Again, the clear instruction of the clear ruling is that they are no longer playing in the Premier League. So he hasn't retired, but he's no longer playing in the Premier League. So I've picked Ronaldo, just I think mainly for his impact. I think he was there for 6 years, and I think you'd be hard pushed to find many names. I'm not saying there wasn't an argument for a few names, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find people who've had as big an impact on the league as Ronaldo has, and his sheer goal scoring ability when he hit top notch for those last 3 seasons when we had him. He was the best player by an absolute mile in the league, and for good reason. But yeah, I think if anyone was to crush Ronaldo go on that right hand side, I think that they need to question
I
themselves.
have to be honest, Bernardo isn't one of my strikers either. So
No.
I have got him in, and maybe the problem I had with Ronaldo is that it's essentially a 3-year, it's essentially a 3-season spell you're counting,
Yeah.
and I try to go with longevity. It's the only reason I didn't count him in. I was thinking Ronaldo. I was like, well, first couple of years, obviously he came across as a teenager. First couple of years he was getting into it and he wasn't really thriving. And yes, those, especially that 18 months around 2007, 2008, those 18 months, he did catch fire immensely. And then I thought he kind of turned off a little bit before he went to Madrid as well. But
I think maybe the last 10 games he did, yeah. But I think the last season, even so, was still...
Yeah, like the start of that last season was great, but like he tailed off towards the end. And I was like, do I... Because the problem I have is I'm not the biggest fan of Giggs.
Yeah.
Which was kind of my problem of why I went for 3 centre midfielders rather than have Giggs. That was basically... I mean, I could have shunted Scholes out onto the left midfield for old-time England's sake. But...
No, look at you being a Sven Eriksson copycat. But I think I understand your argument about Ronaldo that it was basically a 3-season spurt. But that 3-season spurt, he won the title.
Yes.
He won the Premier League.
Yes.
And he probably was the best player in the league. So.
Yeah. I totally buy the argument, but I tried to extend it out a little bit.
Okay. So moving on from that then, who are your 3 strikers?
My 3 strikers are Alan Shearer, Thierry Henry, and Eric Cantona.
Oh. Wasn't expecting Cantona.
Really not?
Okay. No, I mean, in terms... I do understand it.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But I didn't expect you to pick Cantona. Okay.
No,
well, my 2 are Shearer and Henry.
Yeah. I mean, those are the 2 obvious ones, and it feels a bit weird picking Cantona. Essentially, I've picked Cantona over Ronaldo, because you could have put Ronaldo up front.
Yeah.
That's essentially what I've done, which, thinking about it, probably wasn't the wisest choice, but I'm happy with it, so...
Yeah. Which, it's mad that we've actually done this, because it just flashed up that for Henry, it was 16 years ago yesterday that he had scored the 4 goals against Leeds.
Oh, I remember watching that match.
Yeah.
It's just like... Just that Simpsons clip of, stop, they're already dead.
Yeah, mercy.
Just like... Yeah. I think that was the day I tried to Google, is there a mercy rule in football?
I think it's one of the few days. Where I've actually had sympathy for Leeds, and their defenders, because literally every time he got that ball, I thought he's going to score here.
Yeah.
Everything he did turned to goal that day, and most things he did. Henry's just unbelievable, and is probably going to go down in the top 3 or 4 Premier League players of all time. I think, especially in these past 25 years, he undoubtedly is up there. Which is why we've both probably put him in. In terms of Shearer, again, I don't think there's any question in terms of the man's goal scoring ability. He's the top Premier League goal scorer of all time. 260 goals. Can't argue with that. What more needs to be said? Obviously, I mean, again, with Shearer, it's a longevity thing, isn't it? He started in the early 90s and finished in the mid 2000s, not missing a beat.
Yeah, with a massive knee injury in the middle, which killed his pace. And
killed his pace, but didn't kill his ability to score goals. He scored goals consistently throughout his career, and obviously an all-time great Premier League player. In terms of those 2, then I think we've got those covered. So last but not least, give me your argument for King Eric.
For King Eric, well, just those early United sides were so good because of Cantona, basically. Like, United won 4 of the first 5 Premier Leagues, and probably should have won the one that Blackburn did. And everything happened around Cantona. I mean, the thing when I was looking through this is Cantona only got nominated for Team of the Year once, which I found startling.
Yeah.
And that was the year he won Player of the Year. But it's just... But again, it was just like just thinking about football when you're growing up, and yeah, it's just maybe just a little bit before we really got into it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's just that sort of thing of when you just watch games, it's like, oh, okay, just watch football. Even if you're a forward, you don't have to score 30 goals a season to make a massive impact.
Yeah.
It's,
No, but his impact on the team was, even if you haven't seen the football at the time, if you just look at the results, the impact is leaps and bounds in terms of how that team improved.
yeah.
I think for people, as much people say about Cantona, I think the same is said about Schmeichel and his impact. I think for the attack and going forward and the overall team's betterment, Cantona was a huge, probably the biggest piece of the jigsaw. But I think you can make an argument just as much for Schmeichel in the defence. But yeah, I agree with Cantona's impact on the team being a reason for him to go in, because he did make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I know it wasn't in scope for this, but Cantona's season at Leeds, when he came in, he made them win. Like, he basically took them to winning the last old First Division.
Yeah.
And, like, I know that shouldn't count towards this, but part of that's just like, yes, he took, like, go to Leeds, win the title, go to United, win 4 out of 5. Like, yeah, he might be a pivot, like a important part to this jigsaw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing was as well, when I did look at the 4-3-3 formation, I did sort of struggle to look at anybody as a third striker that has had that sort of longevity, because I'd had various names, like if you look through the 90s, Andy Cole, Robbie Fowler, people like that was sort of in there, and then through the 2000s there was like people like Van Nistelrooy, in terms of like maybe outside of thought process, people like maybe like Mark Viduka in terms of his overall skill and goal scoring ability.
I used to love Mark Viduka. I haven't heard that name in years.
Yeah, but it's like in terms of like consistency and impact, there isn't many that are outside those top 2 or 3 that are sort of there. I think when he stops playing the Premier League and retires, I think Aguero is probably going to be someone that's going to be up there.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of Aguero, I was thinking of Rooney. I couldn't make an argument for Berbatov as much as I absolutely adore him. Just...
Yeah, I think that in 10 years' time, it's going to be the likes of Aguero and Kane and people like that. I mean, Aguero will probably be in that argument anyway. But I think
Aguero's already there.
Titles. If Kane wins a couple of titles, he'll probably be in there and consistently scores goals as well. But I think, for the most part, I think we've been pretty spot on with our 2 teams there.
Yeah, like I can't really like none of us has pulled out an absolutely completely random name. Mm-hmm. And when I say both of us, I mean me, because I was the only one in danger of doing that. But
fair enough.
Yeah, I tried for this one to be sensible.
Yeah. No, I think both teams. I think, like we said at the very start, before we start the discussion on the 11, I think there was always going to be arguments for whoever went into either of those teams, and I think we've been pretty consistent and pretty spot on with that throughout. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there for the 2 teams there from us too. Again, I think that wraps up the episode quite nicely. In terms of future episodes, I think we're gonna bring you something next week as to what that topic will be about. We're not 100% sure, with not very much going on at the moment with the current quarantines and shutdowns everywhere, but I'm sure we'll come up with something. So again, if you enjoyed the episode, give us a follow, share it around with people, let us know what you think, and we'll speak to you soon. Speak to you in a bit, guys. See you later.
Bye, guys.